Reolink, one of the most popular brands in home security. They make Wi-Fi cameras, they make wired cameras, they make NVRs. NVR stands for Network Video Recorder, and they also make two different versions of what's called a home hub. Now, I've done several different reviews on Reolink, and in those videos, in the comments, people are always asking me, George, you're talking about these NVRs and these home hubs. What the heck are they? And what is the difference between the two? Those are the questions we're answering today. Let's get to it. What up, everybody? George Langabeer here. When we're talking about Reolink and home security, they have so many different options. They have Wi-Fi cameras. Within that, they have battery cameras. They have cameras you can actually plug in. They've got solar power. And then they've got PoE cameras, which stands for Power over Ethernet. Those are the cameras where you use a Cat5 cable or a Cat6 cable and actually plug them in, also known as IP cameras. When you're talking about all these different options, it's nice to have a central management system, one central place to see them all and record them all. Now with Reolink, they got two different options for this. They've got an NVR, which stands for Network Video Recorder, and then they have what's called their Home Hub and their Home Hub Pro. And again, I get a lot of questions about this, so today we're talking about those two things. We're talking about what are they, what's the difference, pros and cons for each, and who is each one for. So let's start with what the heck are they? All right, let's start with the Home Hub. Now, when I'm talking about the Home Hub, I'm talking about that as a general category as far as this video goes. We've got NVR or Home Hub, but within the Home Hub, Reolink has two different models, the Home Hub and the Home Hub Pro. When we're talking about these Home Hubs, they are compatible with a wide range of Reolink's cameras. You can use them with their wired PoE cameras and their Wi-Fi cameras, whether it's battery or plug-in. So I'm talking about plug-in where you're actually physically plugging them in to an outlet, but they're connecting to Wi-Fi. That also means that we're talking about their solar panel cameras, because when we're talking battery cameras, sometimes you hook it up to a solar panel. So the Home Hubs pretty much work with all their cameras, except their 2-megapixel battery cameras, which are some of their older cameras, that's 1080p, and also their 4G cameras, which is basically their cellular cameras. As far as storage, the regular Home Hub has a 64 gig micro SD card, and then 2 slots for up to 512 gig micro SD cards. So that's local storage with no subscription. And the same thing with the Home Hub Pro, except that comes with a 2 terabyte hard drive and is expandable up to a 16 terabyte hard drive. But no matter what, that's no subscription, local storage. The two different Home Hub models both have smart alarms. So if any of your cameras outside are triggered, you can have an alarm go off on the Home Hub, so it also acts like a security system inside your home. Now again, what we have here with the Home Hubs and the NVRs is like a central management system. One central place to see all your cameras and all your cameras recordings. With the regular Home Hub, it supports up to 8 Reolink cameras. With the Home Hub Pro, it supports up to 24 Reolink cameras, and that includes up to 12 wired cameras. All right, moving on to an NVR, Network Video Recorder. What the heck is that? That is a box that sits in your house. Generally for their PoE cameras, Power over Ethernet, you're running a cable from the camera back to the NVR, and then that's the brains. So it's got all the different settings of the cameras, all the different settings of the NVR, and you can see all your cameras in one spot. Now, much like the Home Hub Pro, it uses a physical hard drive for the storage. And most of their NVRs go up to 6 terabytes. But again, it's local storage with no subscription fee because the storage is built into the box that you own. With the regular Home Hub, you can only see your cameras on the Reolink app. For the Home Hub Pro, they were smart enough to add an HDMI port so you can connect the Home Hub Pro to a TV or monitor and see your cameras that way in addition to the app. Same thing with the NVR. It also has an HDMI port to connect to a TV or monitor. So the Home Hub Pro and the NVR both have that advantage. All right, now that we've talked about what each device is, let's talk about how they're different. Let's talk about connectivity. Now with the Home Hubs, you're connecting all your cameras to those hubs via Wi-Fi. Whereas with an NVR, you're usually physically connecting your cameras to that NVR with cables. Now I know this is a little confusing, but there are some plug-in Wi-Fi models that are also compatible with the NVR, but generally you're using an NVR with their PoE cameras. All right, let's talk about functionality. Now the home hubs have that built-in security feature. So if one of your cameras outside is triggered, you can actually sound an alarm on the home hub, where the NVRs aren't like that. So the home hubs have that advantage where they can actually sound an alarm and scare somebody or alert you when you're sleeping, that kind of thing. As far as functionality goes, another difference would be with the home hubs, you don't have full access to everything as far as configuration. With an NVR, you've got the full interface of both the NVR and the cameras, so you can really deep dive into the settings of those cameras. Whereas with the Reolink app, you've got some cool settings there, but with the NVR, you got a lot more options. Now with the regular home hub, you're using micro SD cards, and with the Home Hub Pro and with the NVR, you're using hard drives. With the Home Hub Pro, you got that 2 terabytes built in. With the Reolink NVR, you configure that NVR to whatever hard drive you want, up to 6 terabytes. So you got some differences there as far as how the video is actually stored. Another major difference would be compatibility. In general, the 2 hubs are compatible with more cameras because you can use them with the PoE cameras. The wired cameras both plug in and battery. That also means solar cameras. The only exceptions would be the 2 megapixel battery cameras, like I mentioned, and their cellular cameras. Whereas on the NVR side, you're limited to the PoE cameras and the plug-in Wi-Fi cameras. Now, even though the hubs are compatible with more Reolink cameras, the NVR can be compatible with some third-party cameras or other brands. You just want to check compatibility because sometimes IP cameras don't always play nice with NVRs, but in general, it's nice that you've got that third-party compatibility with an NVR. All right, now that we've talked about some differences, let's talk about some pros and cons for both the hubs and the NVR. Let's start with the hubs and some pros. First up, we got simple setup. You're connecting the hub to Wi-Fi, then you're connecting your cameras to the hub, and for each camera, you can easily have it set up in under 5 minutes. And again, we've mentioned this, another big pro for the hubs is it's compatible with more types of Reolink cameras. All right, let's talk about the one con for the hubs. For me, is that they rely on Wi-Fi. You can have PoE cameras all you want, but if your hub is connected to Wi-Fi, that can be a con. If your Wi-Fi ever goes out, or you have a poor signal, or whatever it may be. So that's a definite con. Let's talk about the pros for the NVR, and that is the fact that you're generally using these with PoE wired cameras. That is the most stable way to set up a camera system. Again, you're taking Wi-Fi out of the equation. They're going to work whether your Wi-Fi works or not. So that's a pro. As Reolink continues to update the Home Hub Pro and the Home Hub, they'll get more advanced through those firmware updates. But right now, NVRs are a little more advanced and a little more ready for the future and expandability and all that good stuff. So that's a pro in the favor of NVRs. Now, when we're talking about wired camera systems, you've got the cheap drug dealer cameras, you've got my favorite, which is professional grade ALIBI security, but Reolink owns this little sweet spot in between the two, and their NVRs are very affordable compared to their competition. So NVRs in general with Reolink, that's a pro. Let's talk about a con with the NVRs, and that's smart home compatibility. You don't want to buy an NVR if that's what you're all about, is getting your cameras into a smart home platform. That's just not what they're made for. They're a level above that. So keep that in mind. And another con with the NVRs is running cable is not always possible or ideal. Like this apartment, for example. I don't own it. This is an old abandoned power plant. I can't run cable. So as much as I'd love to have an NVR system here, that's why you're always seeing Wi-Fi reviews on my channel, because I can't run cables. So if you live in an apartment or you live in an old building, keep that in mind because it's a con with the NVR. All right, now that we've talked pros and cons, let's talk about which one might be right for you. The hubs would be great for anything residential or a small business as long as you have good Wi-Fi. Because remember, that hub relies on Wi-Fi. So if you've got a good mesh router or a smaller home, then the hub would be just fine. Whereas with the wired NVR system, it would be good for a home, a small business, a large business, a retail store, a school. It doesn't matter because you've got that stable wired connection, PoE, power over Ethernet, a cable from the camera to the NVR. It doesn't matter what's going on with your Wi-Fi. Those systems will still work. So if you're a person that just absolutely wants reliability and don't want to rely on the internet, even in a residential situation, then the NVR would be right for you. All right, there we go. That is the difference between the Reolink Home Hubs and a Reolink NVR. I got the question so many times in the comments of these different reviews I do for Reolink. I appreciate you so much making those comments and asking these questions. Please ask away, because I very much appreciate your support. I very much appreciate you watching this video. Smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, come back for the next one. And until then, peace and love, my friends.